The train hissed like a tired animal as it slowed to a stop, steam curling upward and blurring the edges of the platform. Metal wheels shrieked briefly, then settled, and for a moment everything felt suspended. Sound, movement, breath. Caleb Harlan stood a few paces back from the edge, hat clasped in both hands, his thumbs rubbing the worn brim the way they always did when he was uneasy. He had timed his arrival too early, then stopped pacing because it made him look foolish. Now he waited, shoulders squared, boots heavy against the planks. He had imagined her face so many times it felt almost familiar already. The letter photograph had been small and faded, corners bent from being taken out and put away again, but he'd memorized it all the same. The train doors opened and people began to spill out. Porters first, then a cluster of travelers laughing too loudly, then a woman shepherding two sleepy children. Caleb's heart jumped with each unfamiliar figure, then sank again. And then she appeared. She stepped down carefully, as if unsure the ground would hold her, one gloved hand gripping the rail. She was smaller than he'd expected. Not fragile, but compact, contained, like someone accustomed to making herself fit into tight spaces. Her coat was neat but clearly worn from long use, the hem dusted with soot from the journey. Dark hair was pinned back in a style that tried and almost failed to hide loose strands, and her eyes, wide, observant, moved quickly, taking in everything at once. She paused at the bottom step, scanning the platform. Caleb felt suddenly enormous, acutely aware of his height, his breadth, the way years of ranch work had shaped him into something that might seem imposing to a stranger. He lifted his hand halfway in an awkward greeting, then let it fall again. Their eyes met. Something passed between them in that instant. Recognition, maybe, or simply relief that the waiting had an end. She hesitated only a second before stepping toward him. "Mr. Harlan?" Her voice was softer than the noise around them, but it carried. "That's me," he said, and cleared his throat. "Caleb." "I'm Eliza," she replied, offering her hand. Her grip was light but steady. He adjusted his own instinctively, careful not to squeeze too hard. Up close, he noticed the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the marks of travel and long hours sitting still. He also noticed how straight she stood despite it, chin lifted as if refusing to let exhaustion define her. The wagon waited nearby, loaded and ready. Caleb took her single trunk. Without comment, it was lighter than he'd expected, and stowed it in the back. She watched him do it, then climbed up, arranging her skirt with practiced ease. He took his place beside her, flicked the reins, and they rolled away from the station, the sound of the train fading behind them. The road stretched out, dirt packed hard by years of use, flanked by open land that seemed to breathe as the wind moved through. The grass. Eliza's gaze never stopped moving. She watched the horizon, the sky, the way the land dipped and rose without interruption. Every so often she glanced at him, as if comparing the man beside her to the world unfolding ahead. "It's quieter than I thought it would be," she said at last. "It gets quieter," Caleb replied. "That was about as loud as it ever gets." She nodded, absorbing that. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was full, filled with the creak of the wagon, the rhythm of the horse's steps, the distant cry of a bird she couldn't name. Miles passed like that, the town giving way to open fields, then to land that seemed untouched by anything but wind and sun. When the ranch house finally came into view, Eliza leaned forward slightly, as if needing to be sure her eyes weren't deceiving her. It stood solid and wide, built low against the land, porch stretching across the front like open arms. Beyond it, fences cut lines into the distance, and barns sat farther back, their roofs dark against the bright sky. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. For a moment, neither moved. "This is it," he said. Eliza climbed down slowly. Her boots touched the ground and she remained still, taking it all in. The space around her felt immense, the sky pressing down and expanding outward at the same time. There were no nearby houses, no signs of neighbors, just land and structures and quiet that seemed to listen. Inside, the house smelled of clean wood and sunlight. Caleb walked her through the rooms, explaining without flourish. The kitchen was practical, the table scarred from use. The sitting room held a few well-worn chairs and a bookshelf that had been filled carefully, deliberately. The bedroom he showed her was modest but bright, the window opening onto land that rolled endlessly away. She touched things as she went, the back of a chair, the doorframe, the edge of the table, like someone learning a place by feel. Caleb watched, saying less and less, unsure whether his words helped or intruded. When the tour ended, they stood near the front window. Outside, the land stretched in every direction, fences drawing long, patient lines across it. Eliza's breath caught. She pressed her fingers together, knuckles whitening. "It's too big," she whispered. Caleb frowned, startled. "The house?" he asked, glancing around as if seeing it for the first time through her eyes. She shook her head slowly, eyes still fixed on the view. "All of it," she said. "The land, the silence, the way it doesn't seem to end." He followed her gaze. To him it was familiar, grounding, a shape his life had grown around. To her, he realized, it must feel like stepping to the edge of something vast and unknown. "I didn't mean—" She stopped, swallowed. "I don't mean it as an insult." "I know," he said quietly. She turned then, finally meeting his eyes. There was fear there, yes, but also something else, resolve. Maybe, or the strain of holding herself together after a journey that had taken more than miles out of her. "I just need a moment," she said, "to understand what I've arrived at." Caleb nodded. He stepped back, giving her space without leaving her alone, and waited as the light shifted through the window, and the silence settled around them, patient and immense. The sun had dipped lower by the time they stepped out onto the porch. Its heat softened into something gentler, more forgiving. The boards creaked under their weight, a familiar sound to Caleb and a new one to Eliza, who paused as if listening to it, cataloging even that small detail. The wide sky had begun to change colors, blue thinning into pale gold near the horizon, and the land seemed to exhale as the day loosened its grip. Caleb pulled out a chair and set it near the railing, then another beside it. He hesitated before sitting, unsure whether closeness would feel like comfort or pressure. Eliza solved that for him by choosing the chair herself and folding her hands in her lap. He sat a moment later, leaving just enough space between them to show respect, not distance. They watched the light together in silence. The quiet no longer felt heavy, but it was still deep, layered with sounds Eliza was only beginning to recognize. The lowing of cattle far off, the steady chorus of insects waking with the evening, the wind sliding through grass like water. "I didn't mean to alarm you inside," she said at last, her voice calm but careful. "I know I must have looked overwhelmed." Caleb shook his head. "You were honest. I can handle honest." She gave a small smile at that, then looked back toward the horizon. "Where I grew up, you could hear your neighbors breathing through the walls. Every step of your life happened in front of someone else's window. I used to dream of space." She let out a quiet, almost embarrassed laugh. "I suppose I didn't imagine quite this much of it." He rested his forearms on his knees, following her line of sight. "This land, it can feel like it's watching you sometimes, like it expects something. Took me a long time to stop feeling like I had to prove myself to it every day." Her eyes flicked to him, curious. "And did you?" "Some days," he said. "Others, it proves me wrong." She considered that, nodding slowly. The breeze lifted a loose strand of her hair and she tucked it back without thinking. Caleb noticed the smallness of the gesture, the normalcy of it, and felt something ease inside him. "I agreed to come because I wanted a life that was real," she said quietly. "Not safe, not easy, just honest." But standing there, looking out at all that, I realized something. She paused, choosing her words with care. "A life like this doesn't just belong to one person. It demands more than one pair of hands, more than one heart." He turned to her fully then. "You're right," he said, "and I won't pretend otherwise. I didn't send for a bride because I needed someone to cook or clean or fill a house." His jaw tightened slightly. "I needed a partner, someone who would choose this with me, not for me." Her fingers tightened together, then relaxed. "And if I'm not ready yet? Then we take it slow," he replied without hesitation. "You don't owe me certainty on the first day, or the second." Eliza looked at him for a long moment, studying his face the way she had studied the land, measuring, weighing, trying to understand its contours. Whatever she saw there seemed to settle her. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling. "I was afraid you'd be offended," she admitted. "Or angry." He shook his head. "Fear makes sense. What wouldn't make sense is pretending you don't feel it." The sun slipped lower, the colors deepening, shadows stretching across the yard. Eliza hugged her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the feeling of standing at the edge of something new. Caleb noticed and stood, disappearing briefly inside. When he returned, he draped a light blanket over her shoulders, careful not to startle her. Thank you, she said, surprised, then smiled up at him. You do a lot without announcing it. He shrugged, sitting back down. Some things don't need announcing. They fell quiet again, but it was a different silence now, one threaded with understanding. Eliza's gaze softened as she looked out over the ranch, no longer searching for an end to it, but noticing its details, the way the grass caught the light, the slow movement of cattle, the sense of rhythm beneath the stillness. It's not just big, she said finally. It's alive. And that frightens me more than the size. Caleb nodded. It should. Anything alive asks something of you. She turned toward him, eyes steady. I don't want to run from that. I just don't want to disappear inside it. You won't, he said, just as steady. There's room here for you to be exactly who you are. The land doesn't erase you. It reveals you. Her throat worked as she swallowed, emotion flickering across her face before she could hide it. Then promise me something, she said. Name it. Don't expect me to be brave all the time. A hint of a smile touched his mouth. I won't, I'm not. She laughed softly at that. The sound tentative at first, then freer. The sky had turned a deep violet now, stars beginning to prick through the fading light. Eliza leaned slightly toward him, not quite touching, but close enough that the space between them felt intentional. I think, she said, voice barely above a whisper, that what scared me wasn't that it was too big. She glanced at him, her expression open, vulnerable. It was that I might have to face it alone. Caleb let out a slow breath, one he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You won't, he said again, and this time the promise felt anchored, rooted. Not if I have anything to say about it. She rested her head back against the chair, eyes lifting to the stars. After a moment, she shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his arm, light but unmistakable. He didn't move away. Then maybe, she said softly, a smile in her voice. This life isn't too big after all. They sat there as night settled fully around them, the vast land no longer a threat but a shared horizon, waiting for them to step into it together.